Okay chaps, yoke. So we've talked about yokes oddly at the beginning of the last demonstration. They can be all sorts of shapes. They can incorporate the waist shaping. Actually, on top of what we said before, you could then add seams into them if you wanted. You could have lots of seams that made it quite corsety. But the basics of making a yoke are these. Right, you need to decide what your yoke's going to be, and you need to decide what its measurement's going to be. So when I show you how to make it, you'll think you'll get a grip of the idea that it can't be too long and be just incorporating the shape. Here we go. I'm going to draw on that first one, wasn't it? So I'm having it come not too low at the front. My drawing looks like it's probably about like that. And I'm taking it, actually the side seam there. Now, what is important for you to note here is that I've come to the bottom edge of that yoke and I've cut through that yoke. So we need to think about how we're going to deal with the dart that's been cut through. So what I'm going to do here is, you know how we discussed that darts could be all sorts of lengths from 10 centimetres on? I'm just going to shorten that dart so that it comes in line with my yoke edge. I don't know whether I've discussed this before, but I have a favourite pattern cutting word, which is negligible. So sometimes we want to be really precise, but sometimes, like in this particular instance, I can say, oh, do you know, that 0.5 that we're going to lose on the hip there, or we're going to gain on the hip there, that's negligible. We're just not going to worry about that. Okay, so that's my first thing. I needed my dart to come to the edge of the yoke. If I didn't want to lose this here, what I could do is move my dart as per the first exercise we did in dart manipulation until it came at a position that it sat inside the yoke parameter. Anyhow, that's what's happening here. And now I want it to run through to the back. I hate it when things happen at the front that don't run through to the back. Right, so my yoke is starting on the side seam 8 centimetres down from the waist. So I'm just going to pop over to the back waist seam and put a mark at 8 centimetres. And now I need to think about what I would like the yoke to do at the back. The yoke at the back doesn't have to follow the same pattern as the yoke at the front. The yoke at the back could be the same, it could be different. I'm going to have it vaguely similar. So I'm going to draw a line down here through that. And I'm going to do the same in terms of shortening the dart here. So I'm going to find the centre point at the edge of the yoke on the dart, and I'm going to shorten it because that dart will still be an acceptable length, and you will also be able to play with the fit when you've got it made up and twirled. Okay, so that's the workings of the yoke. Now we need to make it become a pattern. Okay, so I have a piece of paper here. Because this is the front, and you'll note that in the drawing I made of this, it didn't have a seam down the front, so the pattern will be made on the fold. I'm tracing up the centre front. So this, what we're doing now, is very like what we did when we made the facing. Exactly the same technique. So I'm tracing around the top edge and the lower edge, and I'm marking when I come to that dart. I'm now going to kind of pivot that out, the dart out. So I'm taking, as if I was sewing it, I'm taking that line that's one side of the dart and I'm shifting it over till it meets the other side. And I'm going to carry on drawing around to the next dart. It's important that where you stop on the next dart is on the new dart position that you've made, not the old dart position. Okay, then we're moving that over again so the dart joins up at the top, on the waist that is. Whoops, sorry, that wasn't very neat. It'll be much neater, I hope. Oh. There we go. I'm going to say we're going to pop a centimetre on all the way around with it folded so that you'll end up with a whole pattern piece. When you trace around this edge, I've got a funny bump in it. I'm going to even that bump out a little bit there. Don't like it. And again, don't forget, you're not going to be using a big fat felt pen like me. You're going to be using a nice fine pencil. So, yoke. We're going to cut one because it's a whole pattern. There is an instance in which you might want to cut two of these, and that's if you're going to use a yoke lining to finish the top edge. So you're going to use it as if it's behaving like a facing, in which case you would cut two and one of them you would stay flex, which would be the one that was sitting inside. Okay, let me just add a bit of sellotape on the back, because as is quite likely my scissors that fell earlier. Okay. When I folded it, because of the angle it came at, I missed the top edge of the pattern off. You'll probably want to put a pin in it to make sure you get an accurate double side. I am going to use the end of the dart positions as my notches that will take me through to the skirt. On all your usual notches, seam allowances. On this, it'll be handy to have the centre notches. Grain line on this will run with the centre front. It's a 12, I'll just call it yoke 1, or yoke 01, just because I can. Right then, so that's this piece. You also need the lower skirt pattern. So same again, because it's the front and because the design doesn't have a seam down the centre front, you are going to make a whole pattern. I've drawn a straight line, I'm lining up with the centre front. I'm going to trace off that lower design line for the yoke. I'm going to mark the ends of the darts because those have become our balance marks. I'm going to give us a balance mark to mark the hip line, and I'm giving us a balance mark that in this particular instance marks off where the taper begins. Give me another balance mark where the hem turning begins. This will now be folded along its centre front, which is its grain line. And you will add your seam allowance. So we need 1 centimetre here because that's what it was on the bottom edge of the yoke, and it'll be getting sewn to this. So this is the skirt front. It's skirt yoke 01. It's a size 12. It is cut 1. The grain line is going to run with the centre front. Now, one of the reasons I'm doing this, like doing the whole process for this front, is so that you can see what's happened to the waist shaping, where it's gone. Okay, so we're going to notch at the ends of the darts, so this now allows us to put the yoke back into position really accurately, or your seamstress, whoever's doing the legwork for you. I'm going to move this out of the way. I'm going to move the master out of the way. So when you hand this into me, I'm going to want the master pattern, and then I'm going to want the pattern pieces. So if I lay these out as they would be sewn together, you can see where the dart's gone. Oh, sorry, if I get it in shot you will. There you go, so the dart shaping for the skirt is now going out through the side seam. A possibility that you know about because we discussed that in our last session. When you take photographs of this to hand in, I'll have a photograph of the master and I'll expect a photograph of this so that I can see that you've understood how that goes together. I will of course also be expecting the back, so I'm not going to trace that off for you. I think you should understand what happens there. With the back, I am anticipating that you'll have a seam down the centre back, a seam allowance of 1.5 or 2 centimetres. If we're making this half scale, it would of course be half that. Okay, so yoke. Another way of creating shape and adding a style line into. Thank you.